Hello, everyone.
Hi, Hita.
Hello.
Okay, so I suggest we make a start. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this Mix Plus webinar on behalf of the Mix team. So my name is Robert Bain. I'm the regional coordinator for Mix in the Middle East and North Africa. We also have regional coordinators for other regions online. So I'm usually based in Amman in Jordan, and really pleased that we're having this discussion today because there are a good number of countries in the region that are interested in conducting a Mix Plus phone survey, including Libya, Morocco, and Yemen. And in fact, Yemen asked for this experience sharing. And one of the challenges that we have in this region is we don't have any experiences yet, and we just have plans. So I'm really delighted to hear from colleagues who've joined from other regions to share their experiences and to inform the plans for surveys in this region. So thank you very, very much. I think that for me, we'll hear a lot more about Mix Plus and some of the things that you can do with it, some of the strengths and weaknesses. But I think the real beauty is in collecting rapidly information that is robust about children and their families, reflecting issues that it may not be possible to include in a major national survey, and to collect information in between your larger face-to-face surveys. One of the things that's very different to many of the phone surveys, and we'll talk a little bit about this, is that it is based on a sampling frame from a survey or from a register, and that allows you to tell who you're missing from the survey and to compensate for that. So it's really different to doing a random digit dialing phone survey or similar, of which there were many during COVID and many countries are implementing. So that is a strong reason, I think, for Mix Plus being a little bit different in terms of the methodology. So somebody's got their mic on. I don't know if you had. Thank you very much. If you could mute, that would be wonderful. Thank you. So I think that's one of the major advantages, and you can collect a whole range of topics through a Mix Plus phone survey, and that becomes one of the strengths, but also one of the challenges, which I think some of our presenters will speak to today. So a few notes about this webinar. So it's open to UNICEF staff, to statistics officers and others that might be implementing a Mix Plus phone survey or learning from the approaches in Mix Plus for other phone surveys they may be running. We'll have an overview of Mix Plus, and then we'll also dive into 4 countries now have kindly offered to share their experiences. So we're recording this webinar, and we'll make sure that's available for people who weren't able to join today. So that will be online on the Mix website under Mix Plus, and I'll pop a link in the chat later, as well as on the YouTube channel. So we've got an hour and a half today, and I think we've got 4 presentations plus the global overview. So what I'd encourage you to do is during the presentations, if you've got any questions for the presenters, to put those in the chat so that we can answer some of them whilst the other presentations are going on. And we should have about half an hour at the end for a discussion of some of the questions that came up a number of times, and for others to come in, maybe say a little bit about plans in your countries or where you see an opportunity for this type of approach. So without further ado, and in the interest of time, let me pass to Tatiana, who's our global lead on Mix Plus, and will give us an overview of where things stand and some of the key aspects to consider before we pass on to the presentations from the country teams. So over to you, Tatiana, and thank you very much once again for agreeing to organise this webinar corresponding to the needs in this region and also elsewhere. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much, Rob, and hello to everyone. My name is Tatiana Karaulac. I'm working as a Mix Plus coordinator and providing technical support to countries. It's really great to be here, and I'm so happy that this request came from a country or from a countries, because usually we are trying to organize these things and then people hear things, and until the moment they start actually planning and thinking about it, everything is forgotten. So this is the right time for, at least for some of the countries, which I think and I hope it will be really, really useful. I will not take too much time now. I apologize to everybody, but Rob and Kugi confused me. Do you want me to start with the presentation, or we will ask Kugi to start first? What we agreed at the end.
I think you go ahead and then Kugi comes after you. If that's okay.
Okay, great. As Rob said before I start, I just want to thanks again to all colleagues from countries who implemented Mix Plus or still implementing in that stage. These are not all countries, of course, but we find their experience very, very useful and different. So you will be able to hear different situations and different experiences. We have Kugi from Mongolia, we have Madame Florence from Nigeria, we have Jacqueline from Jamaica, and we have a bonus, which was not in your agendas. We invited Georgi from Georgia. This is basically, together with Mongolia, a first country who implemented Mix Plus on national scale. And very surprisingly, to be honest, at least from my side, the Georgia did some of the things which are really important almost perfectly. So we invited Georgi to explain how they did it and what would be to take from there, so you can use it in your own surveys. Okay, let me start with the presentation. Let me share my screen. I don't want to share Jackie's presentation. Can you see it?
Yeah.
It should be in presentation.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I will say a few words in general about the methodology, about the sample frames, non-response, and other challenges that we are facing, about using the dissemination. And then there are a few slides with implementation steps, basically how it works on the field. When I say on the field, I mean when we start with real work, when we finish all the planning. And I will emphasize there just a few things for which I think are really important. And as Rob explained, you will have access to the recording, and we will also share the slides, so you will be able to save this and have it whenever you need a reminder or to see something in details. To remind the majority of you, and for those who never listen details about Mix Plus, just to say that this is a probability selection of a subsample of households interviewed during a mixed survey. This is a basic methodology from where we start. The fact is, and Rob mentioned it, that we can also use other household sample frame, other household, nationally representative household survey, or even a household national register, and Kugi will talk more about that. We also can use a recent census if that exists in the country. Usually we place monthly or more often bi-monthly phone calls to the selected households, and we interview knowledgeable household members over a period of 1 year. And by doing that, we progressively build a longitudinal data on the situation of children and well-being of the households. We are usually doing it for a period of 1 year. And we are doing that because, as you know, things change in some countries very fast. So we want to keep our sample representative. Results can be reported on a real-time basis, and I'm saying can be reported This is an ideal situation, and it is done very often, but not always for different reasons. But we'll talk more about that. These are the basic steps, how we are doing it. We complete mix, we produce mix data, we select a sample. Basically, it's a subsample of households from mix. All those who are interviewed at basically our sample frame. In a mix, we ask about the consent and phone numbers from people who were interviewed. So from all respondents who were interviewed in mix, we ask for consent and a phone number. We set up the data management system and the call center. We will talk more about that. And we start with the first wave of calls. Once when the first calls are placed, when we finish with our whole sample, we basically select the non-responding or out of coverage households and we substitute them. We don't use a simple substitution. I will also talk more about that, but just keep that in mind. We call the substitute households and we finish with the first wave of calls. At the end of this first wave, we basically establish the mix plus sample. Those are the households that we will call in all next waves. In some countries, substitution is not possible. You will be also hearing about that. In some other countries, we may do substitution again if there is a need. Basically, if we assess after we finish the data collection that the response rate is low in sense of apologies, in sense of presence of the bias, and we have an option to substitute, we will be doing it again. Yeah, I said we continue calling them. In the meantime, we analyze and report as soon as the wave of calls is completed. Again, this is the ideal situation. We usually need like very short time. It's around 2 weeks to basically prepare everything and have it ready for publishing. Let's talk about the sample frame. Why we are using mix and why we prefer to use mix. It's a great value. We have all the baseline data that we may need. We know all about the characteristics of the household members. For many countries in last round of mix, we have GIS data and we are using them. We will talk how. Because we are asking for a consent in mix, people are already informed. So basically, when we call them in Mix Plus, they don't object too much. Our refusal rates are very low. Of course, we have other issues which are connected with the interviewing over the phone, like non-valid phone numbers. People change them. Nobody's picking up and so on, but refusals are really very low in all countries. When there is no chance for substitution and there is a bias, we can do propensity scores. Of course, many of you know that other types of surveys conducted over the phone, like RDDs and using the telephone databases from phone companies, they are using propensity scores. But value in our approach is that we can have very good models because we have so many data coming from mix. We know everything about the households that we could not reach. And that's why we have a great success with propensity scores adjustment. Another one is connecting Mix Plus and mix data. You don't need to ask some questions again if you want to cross tabulate or to do some modeling. So basically, we can connect everything with mix findings and then do additional analysis. We are using basically the sample design as is needed in the country. When I say is it needed in the country is we can select specific group or areas, because again, we have everything coming from mix. We can follow up on specific topics. Nigeria had that kind of situation when they saw that something is wrong. These data were coming from mix, and then they ask additional questions to clarify what is the issue in Mix Plus. The Florence will be talking about that. And of course, we can do the scientific-based substitution, which I will explain later. I mentioned this before, we can use National Register of Households, we can use census or other nationally representative household survey. These are the minimum requirements. It needs to be up to date. We need to have access. When I say we, I assume the whole team, including the implementing partners, our colleagues from national statistical offices. This is not always the case. Sometimes even our colleagues don't have access to some databases. So this is no go for Mix Plus, because we need to have access to select the sample, to do the substitution, and so on. We need to have availability of household and members characteristics, and we need to take into account ethical considerations, such as asking for consent in advance. Now, a little bit more about how we are dealing with non-response. We know that there are households without phone numbers or consent, even coming from mix. We will have some invalid phone numbers for different reasons. There's a typo. There is, yeah, somebody is unmuted. Can you please mute? Thank you so much. So we can have invalid phone numbers because of typos, because they are not valid anymore. No response, switched off, people moved to another country, they are not available anymore, and of course, refusals. So we are using two approaches. One, and the main one is basically conditional model-based or matching substitution. In essence, without going in any technical details, we are creating a statistical model using a number of household characteristics. I think average is around 20. And then using that model, we are trying to find the most identical or most similar household to that household that we cannot interview for any of these reasons that I mentioned. So basically, we run the model and we get the substitute households. Usually, those are very, very similar with only very few differences. This is a substitution part. Then, if there is additional need, if when we analyze data, when we see there is a bias that we didn't solve with substitution, or substitution was not possible, then we are using propensity scores model, which I explained already. We have, of course, some limitation, which is natural thing and expected. In most cases, our respondents are knowledgeable adult household members, basically one person per household. We have now situations when we will target the specific a person in the household. We will see how this will go. We did some testing during the pilot of Mix Plus, and we realized there is an increase in refusal rate. But yeah, now we will try again, because we have specific requirements coming from the country for which we definitely need a specific respondent. Of course, stats or observations are not possible. We have limited time for interviews. It's only in average around 15 minutes. We try to do more. We went, I think in Mongolia, it was over 25 minutes and people said no. We also saw that in a cases when interviews are a little bit longer and we ask for a consent to call them again, they are very reluctant, and then our interviews are promising, oh, the next one will be shorter. So then people are saying yes. We have a limited sample size, limited on purpose, because we want to finish data collection as soon as possible, and we want to have our findings available as soon as possible. This is not a way to collect data for, let's say, on national level and then to disaggregate to lower levels. For that, we have face-to-face surveys with big sample sizes. Of course, it takes long, they are more costly and so on, but this is the best way to collect that kind of information. We really here try to go to national level, and then in addition, urban, rural, or degree of urbanization. We can talk about that more. Of course, by doing that, there is potential of inclusion some vulnerable population groups. But if there is an interest and possibility related to sample frame, we can just run a mixed plus surveys for specific groups or specific areas of the country. And it was done before. Sensitive topics are not appropriate. And of course, there is always a question of mode effect, face-to-face versus phone interviews. Are we getting the same answers to the same questions if we are talking with people face-to-face or over the phone? This is a topic, huge topic to discuss. Of course, it will depend on the topic, on the respondent, on the million things. But for some topics, we definitely saw that there is no mode effect when we are talking about this. For some other topics, of course, in advance, we know there is. The challenges that we had till now is basically time between mix and mix plus. In some countries, it's 1 year, sometimes 2 years, which means that phone numbers, there is a huge risk that phone numbers will not be valid, that things changed a lot, which means that there is a possibility we are not getting nationally representative results. So we need to be very careful about this. Ideal is to start like 2 to 3 months after the mixed data collection is finished, not the results published, but after the data collection is finished. To start Mix Plus, we just need the clean data sets. We don't need the final results ready. We can talk about ethics a lot, but we really need to be careful, especially these days. We are getting more and more requests about the privacy, about the ethics. So we need to be very strict about this and very careful. Advanced planning, it's unfortunately proved to be very difficult for countries because everybody wants everything. So it becomes very difficult to say one ministry is okay, we cannot put this in Mix Plus at this point, or you need to decrease the number of indicators you want, or this topic is not possible to collect data on in Mix Plus, and so on. So it can take very long time to plan. And because there is always need for more data, usually this longitudinality of this tool is not used enough, because one of the purposes of this tool is to enable us to collect data that are frequently changing time, so we can follow up what is happening during the survey implementation. And at the end, too much data is also not good, because we invest a lot and then nobody is using it, because new data are coming all the time. So there is no time to see the result, to use them, and our work is just waste of time and resources. So please think about these things. This is a list of main things for which Mix Plus can be used. So we can collect one point in time, we can collect longitudinal data, we can ask about opinions, about attitudes, we can collect data in emergencies. We have one example here. Jackie will be talking about that. We can test new topics and questions and so on. This is one thing that needs to be emphasized and remembered, that data on mix, data from a mix can be collected, not all of them, of course, but many topics can be included in Mix Plus survey. But this is not something that we aim to, because we have Mix for that. If there is a need to follow up on something from Mix, that's great. But also, I need to emphasize that we are collecting data on non-mixed topics. So data that, because all face-to-face surveys, they have their methodology and their tools. And if you try to put something else there, it's overburdening the survey, and there is a big potential of low data quality. So we want to use Mix Plus to collect data which are not in Mix or other big surveys that are, of course, implemented in the country, and then to also follow up on mix indicators. Questionnaire content in each wave can change. Okay, you don't need to repeat almost anything from wave to wave, but also too many changes are not advised, because then we spend a lot of time for tools customization, like application, like questionnaires, interview manuals, training, and so on. So this is something that needs to be kept under control. We publish statistical snapshots, Excel tables with disaggregations, dashboard. It will report. It will depend on your needs. And we also publicly share anonymized microdata every 3 waves of the data collection. You can find everything on Mix Plus pages and the NSO websites in each country. So please go there and see what is available. This is the list on what to consider. I will not go into details. Please have a look. I mentioned many of these. But yeah, this is just to have them in one place. So when we need to remind ourselves, just go there and read. For the implementation, these are the steps. First, you need to plan your topics. I talked about that. It's good to have an open mind, not to lock ourselves in surveys that already exist. Of course, we definitely insist on using the questions that are tested already. We know that they are working for the purposes, for the indicators that we need. But of course, we can test the questions that are not asked or not tested properly. This is always noted in the findings that we publish. When you think about the topics, think about the indicators and their definitions. Please don't think about the questions, because then there is a delay and a very long process of discussing it, what should be done and how. So think about the indicators, definitions, think how many times you want to collect data on that topic. Think about who will be using findings and how. Because if you want to invest in a survey to collect data on one indicator to be used in, some report, please think, is it worth? Sometimes, of course, if there is no data in the country at all, of course it's useful, but sometimes it's really not. We really need to know what is needed to be able to have good tools and to collect high quality data. And as everybody says, think out of the box. I know it's repeated often, but in this context, it's really, really important. We talked about this. I just want to emphasize here that we really find GIS data availability very, very useful. We calculate, for example, degree of urbanization. I can explain more. I don't want to take too much time on this, but it's another classification for area of residence. And it was very useful in almost all countries where we recently collected the data. These are the steps. So, sample design. We need to discuss and to agree on groups of interest, numbers of waves, disaggregation, and so on. If there is a big time in a long time in between sample frame and Mix Plus, we need to do validation. Basically, we select a small number of households and we call them just to check if the phone numbers are valid, because this will influence our sample size. We need to select 2 main samples for the pilot for each wave of the data collection. It's 1 sample, of course, and main sample. Of course, we think about the budget, number of interviews, and supervisors. We establish the data management system. Here is the list of what is needed. I think one of the most important things is basically the human capacities. You need to have a good people to be able to implement this survey as it should be implemented, and to really have a good quality data. This is a list of everything. I will skip this. Tools, we need indicator list, definitions, questionnaires, of course, tabulation plan, training materials. We have trainings before each wave of the data collection. The first one is the longest one, then we can cut for a day or 2, depending on the interviewer quality. Data collection is usually 2 to 4 weeks. It will depend on the sample size, number of interviewers, and working time. Of course, if we implement the substitution, then it's a little bit prolonged, usually for 2 weeks. We have daily monitoring these days. We have a Power BI dashboard, which is monitored by the team in the country and by us, together with regional office. And we found that strong feedback system is really needed. I will leave Georgi to talk more about how they did it, and they did it really, really well. But if this is not done properly, then the whole survey is gone, as you know. We have such a short time for the data collection. So if we don't monitor properly and if we don't react on time, basically not on time, if we don't react immediately, we don't have time to fix things. If we saw that one of the interviewers is not doing good job, we need to stop her or him and see what is wrong. If needed, train the person again and try to fix things. Or if it's not possible, then just to remove the person, because there is no time to see if one will become better in her and his work. So again, it's not enough just to train interviewers and leave them do their job. We need to be with them every day, every hour of their work. Data analysis, tabulation syntaxes are created in advance. We have dashboards. When data collection is finished, we need, usually it's 2 weeks to calculate the wealth index, to check the bias, to adjust weights if needed, and then we have our results and we can disseminate them. And that's it from my side. On purpose, I didn't talk about some things because I know that colleagues will cover it in their own presentations. So I don't want to double things. But yeah, I will give word now to Kugi because she needs to leave before we end today's webinar. So she has time for her presentation, and we will give you some time to ask her a question. Thank you so much. Kugi, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much, Tatiana, and thank you very much, Rob and colleagues, for this opportunity. Let me take you to the presentation straight away. I hope you see my screen and you can hear me well. Yeah, so Mongolia Mix Plus. I'll take you through why we have started the initiative, how we did it, and what was the use, and what were the main implications, both administrative and program-wise. So, as Tatiana has mentioned, Mongolia was one of the first countries that have initiated Mix Plus. Mongolia has a rich history of doing all mix rounds. It's one of the major household surveys, and government and partners were very much aware of what is that there is an initiative called Mix Plus, which would allow you more frequent, let's say, or real-time data collection via phones, etc. And during the COVID pandemic, because also the visit to the households wasn't possible, colleagues were raising if we can do the Mix Plus. But at that time, the latest mix conducted was at 2018, and we were not sure about the availability of phone numbers in the survey per se. At the time, it wasn't where we have been collecting it very systematically, let's say, and that's why the government approached us to look at the possibility if we can do it. And yeah, they wanted it because they wanted the evidences related to the situation of the COVID, understand the situations and the changes of households and children's situation. There were numerous number of interventions done during this period. They wanted also to understand whether these measures do work for people and use it for donors, for fundraising, and also administratively, basically. So to look at the possibilities on the sorry, colleagues, can you mute your microphones, please? Yeah, and collect data at the lower course, and they've been seeing that telephone surveys can be an optimal solution for it. So how we done it, I guess Tatiana has covered very large part of it. Let me just stress on some of them. As said, because we had bit outdated mix, we have been using household registry, household and population registry to draw the sample. And the main consideration, definitely the availability of phone numbers, and all those things were checked, and number of validations were done actually in terms of the phones with the um, with the governance of the administrations, as well as with the communication mobile operator companies for existence of that particular phone. One of the observations we've been encountering during the field is because of the different types of promotions by operating companies, people have tendency to change the phones quite often, and so on and so forth. So these type of things need to be considered. Yeah, it's actually not so very costly exercise. For context of Mongolia, it's 10 to 15,000 US dollars per each round of the data collection. And we will go to the, and if there is a need, maybe some equipment costs, but other than that, it's quite an affordable exercise. And all the processes, as Tatiana had mentioned, are followed. Perhaps in the dissemination, because it was done during the COVID, it has been extensively also utilized by, at the time, we have been calling the cluster meetings, where UNICEF leads and the government leads, and this information has been very useful for them. So again, as it has been presented earlier, we had a periodicity of 2 months. On average, it was a panel of households, yeah, short questionnaires, flexibility in including different topics and questions, and real-time reporting, etc. So this is how it's nationally and regionally representative sample. And we surveyed the 2,200 households. That was our sample size. So as informed earlier, the validation process was performed by the National Statistics Office, both with the local administrations as well as the operating companies for existence of that particular phone number, etc. So basically, the registry contained the information on the household, its members, and some phone numbers of the members of the household. So the validations were done both for non existence of the phone numbers, for not answering, for switched off, and also on the addresses. So as also has been mentioned, we applied the substitution approach, and it worked quite well in context of Mongolia for the response rates. In terms of the questions, because the COVID was the focus, lots of questions around the COVID-related information, knowledge, programmatic interventions, and so on. I guess I have mentioned it. It's not very costly ones, but it also depends if you also decide to establish a call center. If it is a first-time experience, you need to consider some equipment-related costs on that. Initially, as in a traditional mix, we were not considering having any incentives to the households, but along the line, we also observed the high dropout and potential decrease of the response rate. So the incentives were introduced. We also employed the call center, and this is also largely for administration of the calls or for the quality assurance, for the performance monitoring. And but one thing is that NSO had one phone number that was basically coming to a household or interview with phone, and sometimes people want to call back to that phone, and when it doesn't work, it's also not good for the subsequent rounds because it also affects the response rate. So this type of things also need to be considered when you manage the things. In the subsequent rounds, also people sometimes get used to and familiar, and sometimes even got to the phone numbers of the enumerators. So perhaps some other considerations with your equipment is that noise isolating headphones is a requirement because there shouldn't be a very disturbing conversation, and if it is taken in the office, you need to consider also soundproofing. And as Tatiana said, for monitoring purposes, because it was a COVID time, we had an opportunity of administering the interviews quite centrally when enumerators are within the office distance, and you can handle the things as they come during the data collection phase. But we also had the times when uh, it was a complete lockdown and the enumerators had to work from their homes. At that time, we needed to provide them with internet connection and different way of close monitoring, let's say. So those things need to be also considered. Also, the best if they reside in a close proximity and within the office. As said, this training is conducted for each of the data collection round, and the pilot is done. And if you design to follow the same households, the pilot is also done also for the same households.
Hello, lafiya lau Victor na gajiya. Ai,
Uh,
wajen training
so-
ne lafiya lau, kana wajen training ne?
Sorry, can you mute? Yeah, thank you. So then we have, this is, I'm showing the number of waves and the themes we have been covering in these waves, and um, so for the data processing, yeah, the Mix Plus team is very quick and supportive in providing the technical assistance and support. So we don't really face any major issues here. And these are the snapshots and the dashboards we have been coming up. It has been attracting also lots of media in the context of Mongolia because it was the real-time data collection from the households. It was very much appreciated that by the clusters at the time that outcome level, situational type of statistics can be collected through this phone surveys, and these are the entities that have been using the mix plus data at that time for their programs and policies. We've been looking at the cash transfer programs during the COVID, on communication and messages, on distance learning, which has been a major concern in context of Mongolia, as well as other implications on health, nutrition, screen time, child development, and others. Perhaps just some also areas for consideration, as Tatiana has also been highlighting the sampling approach, the survey where we are shifting, let's say, from household focus to population is the one we are planning with the current mix, which we have done in 2023. And response rate management is a key via substitution, via good training, via good human resources enumerators, and so on and so forth. It's important to institutionalize the approach within the statistical institution itself, because at that time, it's only the standard, let's say, mix has been done in accordance with the loan statistics in Mongolia, and there wasn't really provisions or government budget support for the exercise itself. So these are things that still evolve, and utility of the survey, as usual, I guess, as in all the mixes as well, is critical. So creativity and innovations are very much needed and welcome for this instance. And it actually also has been attracting lots of interest also from the private sector and other donors as well, and also could trigger some partnership in data collection field. So thank you so much, and sorry if I have taken a bit long.
Thank you so much, Kogi. You are shorter than me, which is great. Thank you so much. Colleagues, please, if you have any questions to ask to Kogi, I will be here till the end. So if you have questions for me, you can also ask them later. But specifically for Kogi, if you have any questions, please. We have Hisham here. Hisham, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. This is Hisham Lazouni from Yemen country office. Actually, I have a couple of questions for you, Tatiana, and also our colleague from Mongolia. The first one is about substitution. You have, Tatiana, in your presentation, you said that we need to come up with identical household or equivalent household and for us to maintain substitution unlike mix. Again, for me, it's not fair to say identical, because definitely identical in terms of what? In terms of household characteristics or similarities, or identical or equivalent in terms of some specific indicators that we are going to measure. So I would like to get clarity from you, to Tatiana, and from our colleague in Mongolia, how to exactly to do substitution, because for me, easy said but difficult to do, especially equivalent or identical household. because identical could be identical in one dimension, but it's not identical on the other dimension. This is number one. Number two, you said, Tajana, and also I'm going to reflect on our colleague from Mongolia about we need to establish data management system. The reason why I'm focusing on this, does this require additional or re-establish digital infrastructure and also software infrastructure that is different from mix? Again, forget now about the call center and the need to equip the call center with all the necessary equipment, including the Cisco call center and all of this. When it comes to servers, do we really need to establish additional servers and a parallel infrastructure, or are we going to use the same infrastructure and to complement with additional servers? Again, for me, the data is not that huge to ask for the establishment of additional servers to accommodate the data, because the data could be 1/10 or around 1/10 or maximum 20% of the volume of data collected for mix. This is also another point I would like to get your feedback on. Tajana, this is for you. About one of the limitation, you said that potential exclusion of vulnerable population group. This is one of the limitation. To be quite honest, I didn't get it well, because throughout the sampling processes, we have established some sort of randomization. If randomization is somehow maintained, the possibility of exclusion will no longer exist, because if we establish maybe a multi-stage stratified random sample, having said that, the possibility of excluding some groups, whether vulnerable or non-vulnerable groups, will not be the case. Finally, again, this is for our colleague from Mongolia and also for you, Tatiana. When it comes to probability sampling, are we going to sample some of the EAs that were originally included in the mix, or are we going to maintain the same coverage for EAs but with fewer families? Thank you, and over to you, and sorry for having so many conflicting ideas. Thank you.
No. Thank you, Hisham, so much. Kugi, do you want me to start? And then you can fill in.
If you allow me, Tatiana,
Yeah,
I
please,
guess you,
please.
yeah, you can cover most of it, I believe, especially with the substitution, etc. I just want to make a note on the data management part you touched upon, Sham, is that it would be really also context specific. It depends on also your country specific capacity to do so. Generally, you won't require much additional things for establishing the or organizing the data collection and management. It's basically the tablets, what you need to have, and your enumerators, because it can be done easily with the copy, and the call log can also be easily monitored via that menu. So there won't be things. It really also depends on the country context, how countries also imply or vision how the collection also need to be done. So no additional servers is needed, etc.
Okay. Thank you, Kugi. Let me, just quickly try to cover things. Let me start from what Kugi said. Whatever, if country implemented mix, whatever you use in mix, we can use in for Mix Plus. There is no need for any additional things, except for this one, you will need to have a room where interviewers will be sitting, because it's over the phone. People don't go out on the field. Other than that, when we say the data management system, we don't think basically for the infrastructure, because this is the very, very minor component of this whole system. We think about the you know, the software, which is same as the Mix CS Pro, so people already know how to use it. We think about because there are slight differences comparing to Mix, but it's even if I can say much more simple compared to Mix. So there is no. Usually, this part is the easiest one, honestly. When we talk about the substitution, Hisham, it's you are right. Of course, not we cannot find the literally identical household to the one that we cannot reach. What we are trying to do, we try to find the most identical set of household characteristics, which is not, when I say household characteristics, it's not just about if they have I don't know, washing machine or what kind of water source they are using. We are also checking, apologies, we are also checking if they have children of certain age or not. What is the level of education in the household, one and the one that we want to reach. We did a very thorough analysis of the households that we could not reach and those which we selected for substitution in sense of indicators. So we did some thorough analysis. We can talk more, of course, and the paper will be available hopefully by the end of this year. We compared those two and we compared the indicators that we are getting, that we would potentially getting from using the data that are coming from Mix. And those are not different. Basically, they are statistically the same. And we have a presentation which is explaining that on with numbers and everything. You can find it on Mix YouTube page. So please, yeah, go there for more detail. And of course, we can discuss it more in another opportunity. For vulnerable groups, I was mentioning it just because we don't want people to think that if we have Mix Plus, which is nationally representative, that we can catch some minor groups in the country. I can give an example of my country. For example, we have a minority population in the country, which presents like 3% of the total population. So when we conduct Mix, we have just few of them in the sample because they are very few percent of the population. And then when we subsample from Mix, it's very questionable even if we will catch a few households from that group. So yeah, this is just to have in mind what we can get and what we cannot get. From the sample selection from Mix and about your question about EAs, of course, yeah, we are using the same design that is in Mix. I can give you an example. I think in Georgia, we selected 3 households from each cluster from Mix for Mix Plus. So whenever it's possible, we are really using sometimes it's not possible because we don't have, not all households will give their consent and phone numbers. So we don't have a choice there. It's not possible, but we are doing our best. We are really trying to follow up on Mix design. I hope I managed to answer all of your questions. I didn't miss anything.
Just a point which I didn't say about our colleague from Mongolia said that new questionnaires were developed for each waves. My understanding that we will be having a list of questions and then we can identify when those questions will be raised. One, maybe and then it will be answered in some specific waves.
Hisham, can you hear me? We're a bit behind schedule. Would it be possible to put your question in the chat and we'll try and respond to get on to the other presentations? Thank you for your understanding.
Yeah, thank you. And anyway, I could not hear half of it. I don't know if it's my connection or Hisham's. Okay, thank you so much, Rob, we can talk about this probably for ages. May I invite Florence, please? I hope you are still with us. Madame Florence, I'm trying to see. Maybe she disconnected. Okay, Jackie, can you jump in and start with your presentation? And then we, in the meantime, hope Madame Florence will be there.
Sure. Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, let me share my screen.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Share. Okay. I'm not doing it. Am I right?
Not yet.
Okay, it's coming.
There you go. Thank you so much. So, good afternoon, good morning, colleagues. Let me clarify for my colleagues who are online at the moment. I am currently sitting in Nigeria, where we are getting ready to go to the field with Nigeria Mix 7. And Mix Plus is definitely a part of this Nigeria survey. You would hear from Florence as she comes in about the first implementation of Mix Plus based on the previous mix. So hopefully she will join and say some things about that. However, today I'm presenting in the capacity of Jamaica mix consultant. I had the opportunity to be sitting in the Jamaica UNICEF country office at the time the Mix Plus was being implemented. So the Jamaica Mix Plus, implemented over the period 2023 to 2024, was based on, Tatiana, could you please go to slide 3? Thank you, sorry. Was based on the Jamaica Mix 2022. The data collection for Jamaica Mix 2022 was completed in August of 2022. And as Tatiana indicated, we really don't need to wait until the results from Mix are available before we get into Mix Plus. However, in the Jamaican environment at the time, the technical resources were very limited. So there was no way to manage both the mix results as well as begin Mix Plus at the same time. So there was quite a significant delay in going to the field with the Mix Plus. It was only after the mix findings were released that the Mix Plus went to the field. However, despite that challenge, there were some opportunities for Jamaica Mix Plus. The tablets were already procured for Mix, so it was very easy to continue the work using those tablets. The governance structure, which was in place for Mix, the TUR for the steering and technical committee was extended to include coverage of the Mix Plus. At the time, the National Statistical Office was not available to conduct either the Mix or the Mix Plus because they were in the middle of preparing for the census operations, and therefore the Planning Institute of Jamaica took ownership of the surveys on behalf of the government of Jamaica. Some of the challenges that were experienced was that using the Mix technical committee as the governing body, they already know what was in Mix, and they already had a lot of ideas about what else they would like. So we had brainstorming sessions where ideas were tossed out about what were the data gaps. And having seen some of the mixed data already, in terms of reviewing and validating, they were already asking for some follow-up and so on. So we ended up with a long list of topics that people wanted to include in the Mix Plus. It was a bit of a painful process to convince people, as we heard earlier, that not all topics are suitable for telephone surveys, and giving reasons why it wasn't possible to include some of the data that people were really passionate about. But eventually we were able to have a short list of topics, and we managed to sort of narrow that down by having a vote in terms of what would have been useful for most of the users. Of course, we ended up with questionnaires that for some waves were a little bit too long, but in general, it all worked out well. Can we please go to the next slide, Tatiana? All right, so like I said, the NSO was not available at the time to implement the Mix Plus, and therefore with funding support from the Jamaica country office, private data collection firms were invited to submit proposals to conduct the Mix Plus. These private data collection firms, they already had experience in conducting telephone surveys. They already had a call center data management structure in place. It reduced the amount of work on the Planning Institute and UNICEF, since the data collection firm, would handle all recruitment. And of course, they had a vested interest in collecting the data as quickly as possible because they had simultaneous projects happening. However, there were some disadvantages to that. The data collection firm that was eventually selected to conduct the data collection, they had mostly conducted polls, mainly non-representative telephone surveys. So collecting data in a representative survey, which took more effort to try to reach the selected households, that presented a little bit of a learning curve for the firm. They had to be persuaded to put in the extra effort it took to reach these selected households. Usually you want to reach in these non-representative surveys, you have a number of households that you want to reach. If at the end of data collection, you're not able to reach this number, you just call some more households. But they were frustrated because they were not allowed to do that. We had a challenge in that they would not work on weekends for the most part because they're a regular Monday to Friday business. And so we lost opportunities to increase the response rates by having interviewers work on Sundays. We were able to eventually convince them to work on Saturdays, but we could have done more if we could have gotten them to work on Sundays. The CS Pro experience, the application that was used for Mix Plus based on CS Pro, that was very limited in the firm that was selected. And so there was a strong reliance on the Mix Plus global team for the first couple of waves in terms of customizing the application for each of the waves. So, like I said, we ended data collection for Mix Plus in August 2022. However, we didn't get to the field with the first wave of Mix Plus until the end of May 2023. And then by that time, as with the first wave in most countries experience, that took considerably longer than is ideal for Mix Plus data collection. One, in Jamaica's case, we had a relatively small sample frame from which to work with. The mixed sample was about 7,000 households. And the consent for Mix Plus during the survey, it was really small. About 50% of households consented, which means that we didn't have enough of a sample frame to allow us to substitute with any confidence when we had a low initial response rate. So eventually, as you can see under wave 1, Jamaica ended up using almost the entire mix sample for the Mix Plus sample. And because only about a half of them had phone numbers and consent, the effective sample size for the other ways was about 3,000 households. So in wave 1, we managed to interview a little bit over 2,000 households. And by wave 6, that last column should be wave 6, we interviewed about 1,600 households. Now, something interesting happened in Jamaica. Ideally, the plan was to collect data every other month. However, we achieved that for the most part, except for wave 5. We were about to go into the field in early July for wave 5 data collection when when a category 4 hurricane hit Jamaica. So, you know, high winds, the phone lines are down, electricity is out, and suddenly we realize that, okay, people are going through a tough time. Perhaps the Mix Plus is a just-in-time tool to get a better understanding of how the population is affected by disasters such as these. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but just to explain the gap between wave 4 and wave 5. Perhaps now I could talk a little bit about the topics that were covered in the Jamaica Mix Plus. So the management team for the Mix Plus agreed that in terms of to take advantage of the longitudinal aspect of the Mix Plus, there was a very high interest in child nutrition and food insecurity. The Jamaica Mix Plus was the first time that the FIS was implemented locally in Jamaica and in a representative manner. So I think that was a big win for Mix Plus in Jamaica. For child nutrition, it was observed that in the mix, you're generally only able to collect nutrition intake data for really young children. And so the team thought that the Mix Plus presented a very good opportunity to understand children's dietary intake, especially because over the last few years in Jamaica, the issue of children's dietary intake, obesity, the push to have school nutrition policy, those were very topical and continues to be so. So the Mix Plus was really a golden opportunity to get a better understanding on what was happening in that area. In addition to the usual indicators that are used to measure the wealth index quintile, such as water and sanitation, the Jamaica Mix Plus collected data on topics like attitudes towards people with disability, attitudes towards people with mental health problems. We looked at education recovery after COVID, as well as road safety, and did follow up on mix-related topics such as child discipline and attitudes toward domestic violence. As I mentioned, in wave 5, we had Hurricane Beryl. Please, next slide, Tatiana. And next slide, please, Tatiana. Okay, I'm not seeing the next slide, but I can continue.
Which one?
The Hurricane
It should
Beryl.
be about the Beryl.
Yes.
Yeah. You can see it?
No, I'm still seeing the topics covered in Jamaica Mix Plus.
Okay, that's strange. Rob?
Yes,
I can
we
talk
can
about
see.
it.
Same thing.
We see some now.
Okay. Well, so we were supposed to go to the field on July 4th, I think. Beryl hit on July 3rd. Of course, the people who were conducting the interviews, they were affected. The respondents were affected. We could not reach people. And then we recognize that here's an opportunity to implement the mix post-emergency module to some extent. With a Category 4 hurricane hitting the country, it was like the southern part of the country got the brunt of the Category 4 winds, while the northern part received maybe Category 3, Category 2 winds. So stakeholders wanted to understand where immediate needs were, what kind of impact the hurricane had on households and that sort of thing. And so the decision was taken the questionnaire was already ready for wave 5. The decision was taken to adjust the questionnaire to include the post-emergency questions. And we did this across several topics. We looked at impact on the household structure. We looked at access to water and sanitation, whether that was impacted by the hurricane. We looked at how well the social protection system worked in terms of people who needed assistance. Did they know where to go for assistance? Were they able to get assistance? That sort of thing. And we were also able to look at, through the use of GIS, as mentioned earlier, how the population differed in terms of their location. Those who were in the areas that had the most severe winds compared to those in the northern side of the country where the winds weren't so severe. We were able to do that kind of analysis. The beauty of the Mix Plus was that you could make these changes in a short time and go to the field almost immediately to implement. And because the pilot is a standard part of the training, we were also able to test the questionnaire a little bit before we started the actual data collection. Next slide, please. Okay, so I mentioned before that for the longitudinal aspect of the Mix Plus, we focused on food insecurity as one of the main areas. And this, that you're looking at, the results of the FIAS over the life of the Mix Plus. So we started in May of 2023 with about 37% of all households experiencing moderate to severe food insecurity. And in general, it shows that up until the end of the Mix Plus in November of 2024, there was an improvement in terms of the population experiencing moderate to severe food insecurity. At the top, the orange line, which represents the poorest households, we can see that there was a spike in the data just after Hurricane Beryl, which was to be expected, especially among the poorer households. But by the time all the recovery activities were undertaken, we saw that there was the data showed that households recovered by November to some extent. Next slide, please. Okay, so the other longitudinal topic that we looked at was children's dietary intake. We looked at intake of fruits and vegetables, as well as salty and sweet snacks and sugary drinks. We looked at the 1 to 2-year-old age group, as well as the 3 to 17 age group. For the younger children, the sample size was really small, and so we weren't able to disaggregate data beyond reporting at the national level. For the older children, there were some challenges. Well, for all the children, one, as was mentioned earlier, it's just one knowledgeable household member that all the questions are addressed to. But as we know from experience, some questions, depending on the topic, are best addressed to specific persons. So the challenge we had with this is that in some cases, we weren't speaking to the mother of the child, especially for the young children. Therefore, we had a lot of don't know responses. And for the older kids, they were away from home for most of the day at school. Therefore, the respondent really had no idea as to what the children were eating. Nevertheless, we were able to get some interesting data on children's dietary intake, on which further analysis was done, which I'll talk about in a little while. In terms of the post-emergency module that we were able to implement after the onset of Hurricane Beryl, we were able to look at damages to households. For example, we were able to examine these findings by different characteristics, both in terms of the severity of the hurricane, how people in the richest and poorest wealth quintiles were affected, as well as in terms of urban and rural areas. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we were also able to get some understanding of how well the social protection system was working. We were able to get an idea of the percentage of households who sought recovery assistance, those who knew where to seek assistance, and as well as those who actually received the assistance. So that was some very valuable data for the social protection sector in terms of understanding what needed to be fixed in order to address things like natural disasters and so on. Next slide, please. So like every other country, the Jamaica Mix Plus disseminated via statistical snapshots as well as Excel tables. However, in order to increase the use of the data, the Mix Plus team between the PIOJ and UNICEF Jamaica organized what we call the Data to Action workshop, where the data were organized by sector, and we had about 3 days over which different groups of participants came in, they were exposed to the data, they gave feedback or validated, and they also gave suggestions as to how the data could be used to improve people's lives. So at the end of that data to action workshop, we had a document with a list of recommendations, which at the time that I was leaving was supposed to be presented to the parliament for their action. I'm not sure if my colleague from Jamaica, Donette, is in the room, and perhaps she may be able to say something about that. Also, Jamaica, from the mixed data, they did a Mixed Eagle workshop where there was a deep dive analysis of the education data from the mix. Now, as part of that project, there was a national workshop where education stakeholders were able to explore the depths of the education data. And as part of that exercise, the data on nutrition from the Mix Plus was brought in as a discussion point, and participants were really excited about being able to look at nutrition data and the possible connections with education, which the Mix Plus really supported that kind of conversation. And I think that is it for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jack. I'm so sorry for interrupting your presentation. Unfortunately, my Teams just shut off without any warning. Yeah, thanks again. I think the whole Jamaica experience was so valuable for us because that was the first time where I'm not counting the mixed pilot in Belize, which was happening when COVID just started, so we able to use it in similar manner to change everything. But this was real-time experience in running nationally representative survey when emergency hit, and even it was very difficult. The team was really jumping in and doing their best to collect data that was greatly needed. Should we? Yeah, I think we are a little bit late, as Rob said. Let's continue with Nigeria experience, and then we will have the rest of the time for questions and answers. In the meantime, I will try to answer as much questions as possible in the chat. Madame Florence, are you with us? Or maybe Abigail? I'm trying to check again.
Abigail, can you jump in, maybe? Florence is already here. Yeah. Okay. Florence,
okay,
can you?
She's there.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Madame Florence, do you want to share the presentation, or you want us to share for you?
Share from your end, please.
Yeah. In the meantime, I may also want to give a background how we are doing the Mix Plus in Nigeria. The unique context that we are trying to follow in Nigeria is like it's not just like a statistical exercise, but also we are also looking at this as a means to build the capacity of the National Statistical Office. And we are very much grateful with the support we get from Tatiana and team, and also regional office, for all the continuous capacity buildings that were embedded in as part of the data collection. And now I'm also giving the floor to Florence from National Bureau of Statistics, who has been leading the whole process. We would like to be very much open to the experience that we had and also the learnings. Of course, we have a lot of success stories that we can share, and also will also be good to show what could be the possible challenge and mitigations that you need to plan when you're planning to bring in Mix Plus as a process. So over to you, Florence. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jimmy. Good afternoon, everyone. So briefly, we look at the Nigeria Mix Plus. Next slide, please. So like Jimmy mentioned, and from what others has mentioned, in MBS, we have our data management structure already in place. And we have the call center already in standby. So everything was ready before the commencement of the MIS Plus in Nigeria. So we look at the overview briefly and the approach we are using in Nigeria, the number of ways and modules we have covered, and some of the survey findings. Of course, there's bound to be some limitations and challenges. Next slide, please. So the Nigeria MIS Plus, sorry, I can't see the screen is being covered. So the Nigeria National Bureau of Statistics, in collaboration with UNICEF, began the implementation of MIS Plus in year 2023. So MIS Plus generate data to understand the situation of household, families, and children to inform decision making. And of course, the Nigerian equally is a longitudinal survey. So MIS Plus serves as a supplementary data collection tool to the traditional, more comprehensive mixed surveys. MIS Plus combines the power of representative, statistically robust household surveys with the ability to report on a real-time basis over an extended period using CATI. So essentially, the mode of data collection is based on direct phone calls to respondents as opposed to traditional face-to-face interviews. This aims at covering data gaps in between mixed surveys. Like the one we are using currently, we are using the sample from the 2021 MIS survey, and we can see from 2021 to 2023, there is a gap there already. So with the MIS Plus, when MIS Plus came on board, so we're able to cover some data gaps in between because of the little gap that we are having before the MIS Plus. Next, please. Next slide. So the approach that is used in Nigeria, the sample was taken from the Nigeria MIS Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey 2021 mix, which serve as the main sample frame. The sample size for wave 1 was determined as 3,699 households to achieve about 2,200 interviewed households in the last wave of the data collection. So in wave 1, a total of 2,226 households were interviewed. So in wave 2, we have 1,199 and in household, and in wave 3, we have 1,806. Like mentioned in other countries, we adopted a substitution after the first wave when we were unable, maybe due to the gap between the main mix and the MIS Plus for the first wave. There was a gap. So the total sample of 3,699 given to us were unable to meet up with the sample. As a result of this, we adopted substitution. And I learned a question was asked previously asking about how the substitution was done. In Nigeria, the approach that we used was nearest neighbor concept, which has to do with closely similar. It might not be the same thing, but a little similar to what we have before we made those substitutions. And at the end of that first wave, we were able to get 2,226 households. Next slide. Next slide, please. So presently, we have concluded 3 waves. The first wave was conducted from February 10th to 2nd May 2023. And the gap therein was as a result of the substitution. We were waiting. We have a little delay in between because we might be thinking from February to May is a long time. So we waited for the substitution. We decided on whether we actually need the substitution before we waited. That was why we have a long gap between February and May to complete the first wave. So the second wave was conducted in 1st July to 14th August. There was equally substitution in wave 2, but in the third wave, which was just 18 December to 14th January 2025, there was no substitution in that. So we just continue with our panel. We make it a panel, a longitudinal survey, and we continue with the household that we already and we are able to interview. Next. So there are quite a number of modules that we covered. We have some that are just basic standard, that are form of baseline, that are repeated across all the 3 waves. But in wave 1, we cover energy use, and for wave 1 and wave 2. For list of household member, education, non-formal education, household characteristics, and water and sanitation were covered across the 3 waves. Then for wave 1 and 2, we cover energy use. Wave 1 and 2 as well, we treated child education, but in wave 1, we only treated child discipline. Next. So in wave 2, we have a life satisfaction, livelihood. For global warming and climate change, we have that for wave 2. Their registration, we have that for wave 2 as well. Then for healthcare services, immunization, care seeking of diarrhea, care seeking of symptoms of ARI, malaria seeking, care seeking, breastfeeding, and dietary intake. We have those ones for wave 2, and that was the first time for wave 3. That was the first time we covered those ones. Next slide, please. So for the fact that it's a telephone interview, the questionnaires are really short, and it's not exactly the same time as the main mix. We should know that for you to get somebody's attention via phone, the questionnaire needs to be brief and short as possible for you to get their consent and time. So we use between 15 to 18 minutes to interview an household, and these are the duration per wave. So in wave 1, we do minimum of 15 minutes in wave 1. And the changes in this number of minutes or the duration can be attributed to the number of topics, how long the questionnaire is. And that determines the duration of the question. So for wave 3, the duration is quite shorter than the previous waves. Next slide. So these are the response rates across the 3 waves. For wave 1, before the substitution, our response rate was 42.7. And the reason for the substitution then was that most of the numbers were not reachable, and some of the household that was selected were not having phone number attached to it. So without phone number, there's no how the household can be reached at all. Then after the substitution, we are able to determine the response rate to be 60.2%. In wave 2 as well, then our sample size was 2,830. So we're able to reach 57.8% as the response rate before substitution. Then after the substitution, we are able to get like 70.4% for the responses. And in wave 3, there was no substitution at all. And we're able to achieve 74.4%. Remember, it's a panel survey. So we keep repeating the same household. The ones we have called before, we still reach out to them in the last wave. Next. So the results code, I know Tatiana has mentioned some of this, but because of the response rates is attributed to some of this. You have some households that the numbers are not connecting, some households refuse, some you called after several attempts, no response, and some said this wave, I don't give consent to be called. So we call people that consented to be called either now or in the future wave. So for those that we discover that they refuse in the next wave or in the second wave, we excluded them because they said they are not interested. And for those that did not give consent to be called in the next wave, because they already said, I will attend to you now, the next wave, please don't call me. So we filter those people that said that did not consent, we filter those ones out. That is why the changes in the response rate is like that, because some of these people, we are not able to reach out to them. And the result code, we have people that are interviewed, we have those that refuse, we have some households that have no eligible respondents, and remember, we are only interview a knowledgeable member of household, which is just one person. Like Jackie mentioned, some of these responses might not just be accurate because of the person you are interviewing, might not have adequate information about a particular, about other household members. So we have some phone numbers that were not available. Some phone numbers were not available. Some phone numbers, they were inactive. And we have a challenge at this period in Nigeria during some of this wave, that we have this national identity management that your number has to be linked with your identity management number. If that is not done, you tend to lose that number. And some of because of the low cost of achieving a line, you see some of these numbers keep changing over time. If someone misplaces their phone, instead of go through the stress of welcoming back, because there are lots of challenges when you want to welcome back your line, what people does is, if it's not a business line, they can easily get another line because it's cheap to acquire. So with those changes, some of these respondents, we are losing them out because the current number we are having might not be their active number that the household is currently using. Next. So based on that, as a result of that, in the MIS 7 that we are preparing to kickstart, we make opportunity for more than one number per household, so that in case you want to make selection from this household again, we have more than one number with which we can reach some of these households or these respondents. So briefly, we take us through some selected findings from the rounds of MIS Plus that we have in Nigeria. The first one we are looking at is access to internet. Access to internet. So we look at the percentage of households with members with internet access and access to electricity. So this particular topic was only covered for wave 2 and wave 3. We don't have it in wave 1. So for wave 2, access to internet, we have about 64%, while in wave 3, it was 66% of the households that were interviewed. For electricity, for wave 2, we have 70% of the sample, they have access to electricity, while in wave 3 of the sample cohort, we have 72% of the sample having access to electricity. So then by degree of urbanization, nationally, we saw that 66% have access to internet, while in the city is higher with 76%. And the least, of course, is expected is the rural area. Next slide. So please go back, previous slide, please. So that was access to internet. For access to electricity nationally, it was 72%, while for internet, it was 66% nationally. Next slide, please. So we have attendance to formal education for children aged 3 to 24 years. We look at those who are currently attending formal school or early child education program, and this topic was covered from wave 1 to 3 for all the waves. So for wave 1, we have 66%. For wave 2, it was 67%. And this last wave, wave 3, it was 68% from the sample and from the households that were interviewed. So the recording is blocking my heading there. Let me quickly look at my screen. Please, sorry. Okay, so we have percentage of household members aged 3 to 24 years who are currently attending formal school or an early child education program by background characteristics. So we discovered majorly in the city, we have 74% that are currently attending compared to the rural. We are taking the highest and the least. So for the ages, we have the younger children aged 6 to 11. That's 90% of them are currently in school compared to age 18 to 24 who are currently in school to be 28%. So by education level of household health, from the sample we took, we discovered that 80% of them are into higher or tertiary education, while only 49 of them are just has non-formal education. And when we look at the wet quintile, the richest took the lead with 79%, while the poorest is having just 58%. Next slide. Next, please. Okay, so when we have awareness and worried about climate change, we have percentage of respondents who have heard about global warming and climate change. This topic was only covered for wave 2, and we have 52% of the sample that they said they've heard about global warming and climate change. So when we look at how worried this sample are, we discover that from what we have, we look at the, sorry, is the recording that is covering my topic, please? Okay, percentage distribution of respondents who have heard about global warming and climate change by how they are worried about global warming and climate change by degree of urbanization and sex. Like I mentioned, it was just covered in wave 1. So for those that said they are very worried, nationally 53% said they are very worried about global warming and climate change, while 20% said they are somewhat worried, and 11% said they are not very worried. And when we go further by degree of urbanization, we discover that the rural area said they are the most worried, they are very worried, because 63% of them said they are very worried. And in the city, we have the list of worriness, which is just 48% that said they are worried. Next slide. So of course, we have limitations and challenges, like I mentioned earlier on, in terms of reaching out to these respondents, there was a period we have a challenge in the country which has to do with the National Identity Management Office, that has to do with linking of your mobile phone to your national identity number. If that is not done, the owner of the line tends to lose such number, and there are some steps, some procedures that need to be followed. Some does not have adequate time, or they don't have knowledge about this. Some did not do that. They tend to lose the number, and some of these numbers are the numbers we have. And because of this challenge, we have some of these people, we have inability of getting across to them. And that was majorly, again, the reason why we substituted, because we don't have up to the required sample from wave 1. So another challenge that we have is challenges of people relocating, changing of numbers, because numbers are frequently changed. People that keep numbers are majorly, maybe you are a businessman, is a number that you are well known with. But if it's just somebody to use it to receive call, once that is missing, they can easily go to get another line to replace the missing one. If that is done, we will not have access to that particular respondent because of the changes in the line. Next. So the limitations, like Tatiana has already treated this, though I will still mention some, like there are some modules that you cannot just ask via phone, and because of the sensitivity, there are questions you cannot ask on phone. And even from the birth registration that we covered, we discovered that we cannot compare the results with that of the main mix, because in main mix there was direct observation. You check the card to see the number of vaccines that were taken. But for the Miss Plus, we just ask if those people have, if the children have taken immunization, if they have, so that's different, because we are not there to observe. Even when they say yes, we just believe what they have said, because we are not to doubt their responses. If they said they have taken it, we accept they've taken, but we cannot compare the results of our birth registration or immunization via telephone interview with the main mix. So in terms of household relocation and its implication for reporting on the area of residence, so the movement of people from one area to another affects the results that we get from there, because the background characteristics of where they have moved to might be different from their previous, especially when we are reporting using the degree of urbanization, because it tends to affect our results. So it's a challenge. And like Tatiana stressed, the time between sample frame and mix plus, there's always a gap. From the sample we took from 2021, and we are calling those respondents in 2023, many of their numbers must have been replaced. Many of the numbers must have been changed. Many of the numbers must have been, might not be working again. So those are the major challenges, because of this, they tend to change their numbers frequently. Next slide. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Florence. Well done. Maybe to supplement, one of the key components that we see the best use case of mixed classes, instead of focusing on the coverage or also a percentage of services, we are trying to use it to respond to some of the whys, and also at least to inform the actual implementation of programming. Sometimes, yes, it's very reliable. At least it will come with national representative coverage, but not for all indicators, as Tatiana and Florence highlighted. We have to be very much careful on the type of topics that we select, and then we would like to conduct over the phone. You don't know who is responding. It's any adult person, so this thing should be considered. But except that, if the culture also allows, you can also further expand it to more indicators. But importantly, we see the value of Mix Plus in actually informing our programming, identifying the reasons why things are not moving or why things are going much better than before. So we are trying to see Mix Plus as an added value to inform our programming and also raise the questions of some of the bottlenecks and others, instead of only focusing on the change or on the change of the coverage or percentages as well. Thank you. Back to you, Tatiana. Yeah.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Florence, very much. I know we are so late, and apologies for that. I would just like to invite Georgi, if you can tell us a few words that I already announced that you will be talking about. So there is no presentation. Georgi will just explain how they did it in Georgia at that time. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Tatiana. Yes, I will concentrate very briefly on the quality assurance. Since the presenters already provided some comprehensive information on the survey objectives, methodologies, modules, aspects, findings, etc., I will concentrate briefly on the quality assurance that we have implemented during our Mix Plus, which we did between 2020 and 2021. We have actually conducted 6 Mix Plus, approximately 1 in 2 months each wave. While theoretically, the location of the call doesn't affect the quality of interview. So theoretically, again, it doesn't matter from where the call is conducted. But conducting interviews within a controlled call center environment significantly enhanced the quality of the collected data in our thinking. To support this initiative, we actually the National Statistics Office allocated like 2 big rooms. It's more than 100 square meters. That room was equipped with mobile phones, headset, desks, etc. We recruited 1 supervisor and 14 interviewers for this work. And before each wave, the field personnel received 2 to 3 days training following by a 2-day testing, which actually tested all the choreography of the work, starting from the testing of questionnaire until the database generation. Then the fieldwork was divided into 2 stages. The first stage, it lasted 13 days, so less than a 2 week, while the second stage, it lasted 4 days only. I will describe more on these stages. So the first stage that lasted less than 2 weeks, we divided by actually 2 parts, the stage 1. First 7 days of stage 1, interviewers worked from 11 a.m. until 8 p.m. For the remaining 6 days, they had flexibility to conduct interviews at any time within the window. So whenever they wanted, they could come in the call center and call. It was mandatory that all calls be made from the call centers. They couldn't make any call outside the call center. The call center was continuously staffed by a supervisor. As I mentioned, there was 1 supervisor sitting all the time during these stages at the call center. Additionally, during the first 7 days of stage 1, I myself, along with 1 or 2 staff members from National Statistics Office, were present full-time. So why we needed this? We closely observed each interviewer during their sessions by literally sitting beside them while they conducted interviews, listening how they conducted interviews, etc. I have to mention that we didn't hear respondents' answers, hence there was no need for the consent, because we only heard how interviewer did the interview, how they read the questions, etc., and so forth. Together with the supervisor and statistics office staff, we monitored interviewer performance or offered, technical and methodological assistance in actually real time, during this data collection process, and mainly the first day of the stage 1. At the end of each day, observations from supervisor, staff of National Statistics Office, and myself were compiled into single report. We also conducted daily analysis of field check tables. So as I mentioned, the work started at 11 a.m. every day. So every day started 11 during 1 hour. So from 11 to 12, interviewers received detailed feedback based on the previous day's performance. So those compiled reports were presented. Printed lists of all issues were shared, and we reviewed mistakes collectively to ensure broader learning. So errors made by any individual, any interviewer, were discussed with the entire team, since others may not have encountered similar situation in the future. It doesn't mean that they have better knowledge. For example, there could be a specific, issue, and only one interviewer did, but it doesn't mean that any other wouldn't do if they face with a similar, similar situation, which is, for example, which is rare. So everything we have presented to all the interviewers, and we were sharing to all the interviewers all the list of errors, etc. And okay, but we also, in addition to this, feedback from field check tables analysis was also shared during this 1 hour daily meeting, and interviewers received further guidance based on, field check tables. Where needed, questionnaire sections, particular sections were re-explained, and additional methodological insights were provided as needed based on the concerns we have had during the previous day. So this continuous feedback process greatly contributed to the high quality of collected data. So during the first day of the stage 1, as we were doing, contact was successfully made with nearly all the households. Final responses, whether completion or refusal, were obtained from the majority. The remaining, why we divided this first day 7 and 8. The remaining 6 days actually focus on households that were unavailable during the initial period and postponed interviews or didn't answer to calls. And we have established a protocol which said that in order to classify a household as unreachable by phone, so if we could say that they never answer, the interviewer was required to attempt contact on at least 5 different days. Not 5 calls, but 5 different days and at least 1 call per day. So this is the completion of stage 1. In the second stage, actually, we conducted after the completion of stage 1, and that lasted 4 days. But before starting, we didn't involve all 14 interviews in stage 2, but we only involved the best 5 interviewers from particular wave. For example, in wave 2, we just selected best 5 who had the highest response rates, etc. So these interviewers were assigned the households that had refused participation during stage 1. So we had an n number of refusals in stage 1. So those households were redistributed to the best of 5 interviewers, but with one condition, that households were never contacted by the same interviewer twice. So if I had like refusal from the particular household, and I'm among the best 5, these households were given to another person for the second stage interview process. So across waves, response rates during stage 2 varied between 20 to 40%. So at least 20% were convinced by those 5 best interviewers in the second stage, and the maximum of the response rate in the second stage was 40%. Based on what I've mentioned, we never had, in total, in general, we have never had, response rate less than 80% in any wave, and we conducted six wave. Overall, the quality assurance during fieldwork was ensured by close monitoring, and this was my main idea to explain. The key was here the close monitoring of fieldwork and daily review sessions. And in this activity, we have involved, and coordinated between the supervisor, statistical office staff, and myself from UNICEF. So I know that we already are behind the schedule, so I did it as quickly as possible.
Thank you so much, Georgi. Yeah, I will try to sum up now to short things. Unfortunately, we don't have time. I don't want to keep you more for some questions and answers. Please place your questions in the chat for colleagues who have access, even when the webinar is finished, and we will do our best to provide answers. I really want to thanks everybody. I think your experience will be very, very helpful to countries who are planning to conduct Mix Plus or even similar surveys. It's always good to hear what problems others had. There was a colleague asking, I think from Nepal, which 3 things we should not do, which I think it's a great question. I try to answer. There are many things that we should not do, but some of them are really important. I especially want to thank to Kugi and Georgi because Mongolia and Georgia are the first countries conducting Mix Plus, and we learned together. Their involvement really was I cannot describe it even for the development of this tool. We improved a lot from that time. So thank you guys once again. And of course to Jackie, to Jimmy, Florence, Abigail. It's a great experience. I know all of them would be available to help other countries to answer some questions. So please reach to us, reach your regional coordinators, and they will know, who to ask and how to help you. I hope I didn't miss anything, Rob.
No, it's great, Tatiana, and thank you very much, everyone, for the participation today. And sorry again that we overran a bit, but I think it was a really rich discussion, and I think it will help us, certainly in the MENA region, shape the surveys that are coming up. And thank you once again, to all the presenters.
So yeah, enjoy the rest of your week. Reach to us for anything, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Take care.